Hello, and welcome to Neotopia, the podcast, a new place to learn about theology. I'm your host and teacher, Jillian Mason Shannon, and today we're going to pick up from where we left off on the last episode. I recommend going back and seeing episode 2 in case you hadn't already seen it, because we're picking up right where we left off. Neoclassical theologians define God as the one eternal, all-inclusive whole of reality that is greater than the sum of its parts, which means that God both includes and transcends all that is. God is both within and around, and everything that exists is a part of God. Practically speaking, along that line of reasoning, it is impossible to say, I love God out of one side of your mouth, and then I hate my neighbor out of the other, since the neighbor is a part of God. It makes no sense to love God while doing harm to another person that is a part of God. So the question remains, what about those that do really heinous crimes, heinous, unjust crimes, those who seem to be completely devoid of compassion and empathy and use their power to tear down other people who are less fortunate? Are they a part of God? In your mind, I want you to draw a big circle. Okay, that is God, the all-inclusive whole of reality. Now, smaller circles attached to the outer line of the big circle. That represents humans, animals, the natural world, outer space, all that exists. All that exists and are real because they are part of the bigger circle, reality itself. What happens when we sin is we lose touch with reality. We choose to place ourselves over here, outside of the circle, attached, connected to nothing. And we view everything else outside the circle as well. And when we lose touch with reality, we begin to value ourselves more than we should. Everything else, all those other little circles, animals, people, nature, are mere resources or threats to our very existence. Each and every person becomes the center of their own little universe, and that is a very dangerous place to be. Classical theology states that God is all-powerful, all-knowing, providential, perfect, immortal, unchanging, unable to suffer, and pure love, goodness, justice. Okay, well, the problem of evil throws these attributes for a loop. How can we justify God's existence, God's goodness and power at the same time when such tragic, unjust things occur? Either God is not actually all-powerful because God couldn't intervene or didn't intervene, chose not to, which means how could God be all good? Or God isn't pure love, justice, and goodness because terrible, horrible things happen, and we're over here just justifying God's existence, saying God planned it, or worse, God orchestrated it. Centuries of theological discourse have been devoted to solving this problem of evil. How can there be a God when an innocent child suffers from cancer or a genocide occurs? And oftentimes, this is the very reasoning that leads to atheism. Either I just can't believe in a God, or I refuse to worship a God who would allow these things to happen. Back to the neoclassical reasoning. Evil occurs when we separate ourselves from the all-inclusive whole of reality. Evil is losing touch with reality, forgetting or maybe never knowing that we are all in this interconnected web of being. When we lose touch with that reality, we value ourselves more than we should, and that is the source of sin. Sin is usually defined as missing the mark, or rather, missing the point of life. And many people go their entire existence simply missing the point. And who suffers most from this but the person themselves and the people around them and God, because those suffering are actually a part of God. So is God all-powerful, all-knowing? If we ourselves have the choice to opt out of this all-inclusive whole of reality and use our power to cause havoc without intervention from God, I suppose it depends on our definition of power. We in the Western world equate power with control. But God's power is counter to this type of power. God's power is influential, not coercive. And it can only influence those who are open and able to be influenced. For those who prefer to think in terms of the Spirit, look at the word Spirit, and there will be a clue as to the agency of the Spirit, the activity of the Spirit. It's in the word if you look at it closely. The Spirit inspires us toward love, justice, goodness, human and cosmological flourishing. In Hebrew, the word spirit is ruach, and in Greek it is pneuma, both of which translate to both breath and wind. So the Spirit is both within and around, gives us life, our source of existence, and has the power to soothe, as in a breeze, or shock, as in a gust. But still, we must be open to paying attention. When we fail to do so, it is because we're too much in our own skull-sized kingdoms, lost in our own thoughts, identifying with our thoughts, too much so to hear the will of God moment to moment. In the German movie Wings of Desire by Wim Wenders, who also brought us other classics like Paris, Texas, there's a scene in which a man is standing on the roof of a very tall building and he's going to jump. And people are trying to get him down, saying, come on, come on, come on. And Wings of Desire is about angels living on earth. And the angel is there. He obviously can't be seen. And he's just standing there, maybe puts his hand on him, fully present with the man. The scene is a constant stream of thoughts. Just, why did I wear these red socks? What's up with me with my jacket? What's up with the pebbles on the roof? This is ridiculous. Just, what does that mean? It's just constant stream of thoughts, can't be interrupted. And then the angel puts his head on the shoulder of the man, hoping maybe as he's sitting on the edge, he won't jump. And the man says, all of these thoughts, I'd really just rather not think anymore. And he jumps. And the angel is as shocked and upset as everyone else. Think of the angel as our divine character. Think of the angel as God. Was God all-powerful? If God didn't intervene and just hold the man back from jumping, well, he can't. God can't. God doesn't operate that way. A hand cannot come down from the sky and move us from place to place. The power of God is not in God's control, but in God's presence. And it is powerful, influential, as long as we're available. The man on the roof, his mind never stopped. He was lost in his own skull-sized kingdom. We have the choice at every moment to choose life or death. And the only reason to worship God, which means to worship means to orient our lives toward something, is not to appease God's ego, like God is some inflated version of us, but because worshiping, meaning orienting our lives toward that end, it's better to center our lives toward the interest of the whole than anything else, because that's the only thing that's going to get us out of the way. Further, the all-inclusive whole of reality is the only thing that's real. So anything outside of that circle of reality is, well, not real. And we are now worshiping nothing but an illusion, which takes more and more and more and more and more and more and more of what doesn't work, turning us into addicts or mere shells of ourselves, outside of our very source of existence. Let's hear from late author David Foster Wallace in his famous commencement address, "This is Water," which sums it up more powerfully or influentially than I ever could.
Because here's something else that's weird but true. In the day-to-day trenches of adult life, there is actually no such thing as atheism. There is no such thing as not worshiping. Everybody worships. The only choice we get is what to worship. And a compelling reason for maybe choosing some sort of God or spiritual type thing to worship, be it JC or Allah, be it Yahweh or the Wiccan mother goddess or the Four Noble Truths or some inviolable set of ethical principles, is that pretty much anything else you worship will eat you alive. If you worship money and things, if they are where you tap real meaning in life, then you will never have enough. Never feel you have enough. It's the truth. Worship your own body and beauty and sexual allure, and you will always feel ugly. And when time and age start showing, you will die a million deaths before they finally plant you. The whole trick is keeping the truth up front in daily consciousness. Worship power, you will end up feeling weak and afraid, and you will need ever more power over others to numb you to your own fear. Worship your intellect, being seen as smart, you will end up feeling stupid, a fraud, always on the verge of being found out. Look, the insidious thing about these forms of worship is not that they're evil or sinful. It is that they are unconscious. They are default settings. They're the kind of worship you just gradually slip into day after day, getting more and more selective about what you see and how you measure value without ever being fully aware that that's what you're doing. And the so-called real world will not discourage you from operating on your default settings, because the so-called real world of men and money and power hums merrily along on the fuel of fear and anger and frustration and craving and the worship of self. Our own present culture has harnessed these forces in ways that have yielded extraordinary wealth and comfort and personal freedom. The freedom all to be lords of our own tiny skull-sized kingdoms, alone at the center of all creation. This kind of freedom has much to recommend it. But of course, there are all different kinds of freedom, and the kind that is most precious you will not hear much talked about much in the great outside world of wanting and achieving and displaying. The really important kind of freedom involves attention and awareness and discipline and being able truly to care about other people and to sacrifice for them over and over in myriad petty little unsexy ways every day. That is real freedom. That is being educated and understanding how to think. The alternative is unconsciousness, the default setting, the rat race, the constant gnawing sense of having had and lost some infinite thing. I know that this stuff probably doesn't sound fun and breezy or grandly inspirational the way a commencement speech is supposed to sound. What it is, as far as I can see, is the capital T truth with a whole lot of rhetorical niceties stripped away. You are, of course, free to think of it whatever you wish. But please don't just dismiss it as some finger-wagging Dr. Laura sermon. None of this stuff is really about morality or religion or dogma or big fancy questions of life after death. The capital T truth is about life before death.
Life before death. If our DNA is divine, we don't need to spend our lives trying to figure out how to be godlike in the way that we understand God as immortal, all-powerful, gaining power and influence in eternal life. Rather, we need to learn how to be human. And what keeps us from being better humans is not intentionally choosing evil, but not consciously choosing anything at all. We're so often living and operating unconsciously. So in the next several episodes of this podcast, we're going to take a fun approach to the biblical narrative. The Bible is one of our oldest, sprawling documentations of human existence. So we'll look at some of its well-known stories and through it, evaluate the evolution of human consciousness. You won't want to miss those episodes.